Like many people of my generation, we grew up on the kind of Bruce Lee, Kato, Green Hornet era, and Wild Wild West, the original one. And you're kind of looking at the guys fighting. It was different. It wasn't MacGyver and or 24 or stuff like that. So that made a big impression. I remember I was always messing around with punches and kicks and doing stuff like that, and just always seemed to be into it. And when I was a young kid, Enter the Dragon, of course, released, and the world went crazy. And Bruce Lee just passed away, and that was probably one of the biggest if you will, ripple effects in the world. I mean, everybody was into stuff at that time. And I joined the Taekwondo school in my native hometown, Montreal, and just loved it, fell in love with it, took to it right away. I mean, I trained 7 days a week. I rolled out of bed before I went and brushed my teeth. I'd bang out, push-ups and ab work and stretch and throw some kicks on the way to the bathroom. And, and I was like 13 years old. I had wrestled for many, many years before that. And then when I was in school, I guess 14 and a half, 15, I got into, I'd been in some fights before, but never even thought about them as fights. You start to think about fights differently once you start training, because you get, especially if part of your path is to teach, because you get hyper analytical about what you did, what you should have done, and you get performance anxiety because now there's like bird's eye view of what you should have done. And so I got in this pretty crazy fight in school, and I remember this guy. I remember just before we knew it was going to erupt into physical, and it was just this verbal assault phase. And he's yelling at me, and I'm trying to calm him down. And I found myself, with what we teach now, nonviolent posture, my hands out, outside 90, my fingers were open, and he's screaming. And just as I was about to go, okay, let's, here we go. I remember hearing my instructor's voice in the back of my head saying, if I catch any of you fighting outside of the dojo, you're out of the school, And so this was before Cobra Kai, where it was like, go kick somebody's ass,
right?
And it was interesting because it was powerful. I suddenly, I went from macho testosterone to, oh shit, I can't fight, because I loved the martial arts so much that just the thought that I'd be expelled from the school was enough to take a punch in the face. And what was interesting was I said, look, man, I can't fight. I'm not going to fight you. Nothing you can say or do makes me angry. So he started to get really a lot of bravado when he realized I was backing down. He didn't realize I was backing down because of my fear of my instructor. He thought I was backing down because I got scared of him. And he starts poking and shoving. He's getting in my face. And finally, there was no turning back. I realized that if I turned or walked, I was going to get sucker punched. And we went, and I nailed him with a shot, and he came back with a big. It was classic, because we were. I think what's telling about this is we were with outside arms range. I'm like, he's poking me, and I'm going, get your hands off me, And while I'm having this conversation, don't fight, you can kick out of school, there was another conversation, he's too close to kick, because my passion at the time was Taekwondo, which is predominantly a kicking art, and
right.
I didn't think, back fist to the face was going to be relevant at this point. And that was like loud. He's too close to kick. What are you going to do? And next thing you know, boom, I nail him with a shot, and he comes flying back with a big overhand right. And I remember now, and it was, this is way before the spear and startle flinch conversion and everything that we've since evolved and presented to the martial art world. But my hands came up to cover my head, and his arm hit my forearm, and I turned it right into like a perfect judo throw, because I got slammed backwards like this, and I grabbed onto his arm, and I hooked around, hooked it at his head, and I threw him to the ground. And as soon as he hit the ground, over like a just improvised hip throw, I grabbed him by the hair of his head, and I yanked him into the desk. This fight broke out in the classroom, and I slammed him into the desk and turned him, and I yelled at him, "If you get up, man, I'm going to drop you." And he was stunned at this point, and that was the fight. I mean, it lasted, you know, it was 3 shots. It was the first punch to the face, it was the hip throw, and then slamming him into the desks, which was pretty significant because, you know, it's like getting hit with a baseball bat from behind, right? I mean, it just really knocked the wind out of him. And I remember, you know, so the fight ended, and, you know, it was back in the day when you don't get suspended, or back in the day when someone doesn't come back and shoot you. I mean, it was 1974, 75, and it was just a fight. And long story short, I got back, and I was like reflecting on when Bruce Lee had that fight that lasted too long. He realized he had no conditioning. Remember the Long Jack Man fight? Yeah. And I'm thinking, holy shit! I mean, I was so caught off balance by the lack of hand combinations and knowledge that I immediately started boxing. So I started boxing. I was doing Taekwondo, and I didn't realize that how big of a deal my wrestling background was, because you just never did it. I mean, this is 10 years before the first UFC. Mm-hmm. And but I went messing around. I was up at my dad's house, and we set up a video tripod with one of my first students. And this was back in the day when you actually put a VHS cassette inside of a. I don't know that any of your listeners know what I'm talking about. You know, everything's this big now. But and we filmed it. And my student was a buddy I met at university, and he was 6'3", 6'4", lanky. But, you know, when you punch from that distance, shit hurts you. I mean, because you got, you know, velocity and distance, and, you know, all of the physics are into that. So when we used to spar, I mean, it was wild, because he was about the same weight as me. But, you know, we were good buddies. It wasn't like a student-teacher relationship. It was we were friends. We used to beat the shit out of each other. So we're going to go film this. We finally got a camera. We're going to go film this. And I go to tap gloves with him, and we're in the junior safety chops, and he ricochets off at the tapping of the glove and punches me right in the face, just, you know, like being a dick, my buddy, right? And immediately moves in, and we get into, it's the first fight on, if anyone has my Forging a Fighting System VHS video DVD, it's the first fight we have on that, and it goes, you know, he punches me and goes in, and we just goes right into the ground. We're fighting on concrete. I mean, I take him right to the ground, I wrap him up in a little, you know, I pretzel him right away, and I pin him, and I stuff him, and this is like, again, like this is probably 1980, and you know, that fight 10 years before the UFC, and I screwed up. The first fight I had in school that I was talking about was like 20 years before the UFC, but this fight in the driveway was probably 10 years before the UFC. But all it was the power of wrestling, keeping me on my feet, getting him down, pinning him, and then it was like ground and pound, but I had no idea what I was doing. It was just, you know, just next thing you know, you're drilling the guy, and you're going like, what are you doing, you idiot? You just punched me in the face. You sucker punched me, and we're sparring, and we laughed and everything, you know. But that was really kind of a, you know, a 5-minute overview of like that 10 years. I mean, when I was 13, my mom asked me, "What are you going to be when you're older?" I said, I want to teach self-defense, you know, like Bruce Lee, or, you know, I'm going to have my own martial arts system. And she patted me on the shoulder and said, "Okay, dear, we'll talk about this when you're older." Right. It was just something I always knew, Mike, that I was going to do, and just here I am at 50 doing it, you know.